I'm beginning my search in the far north of the continent, in what is now known as the Sudan. I'm looking for the legendary kingdom of Nubia. Nubia is the traditional name for the northern part of Sudan, near the Egyptian border. For thousands of years, a civilization dominated the area there, in what's now the Eastern Sahara. It's first mentioned by the ancient Egyptians as a primitive outpost, a source of slaves and treasure, dancing girls and wrestlers. To the Romans too, it was a barbarian wasteland. Yet these people were conquerors in their own right, ultimately defeated not by their rivals, but by their environment. Nubia has left us some of the most spectacular monuments, not only in Africa, but in the whole world. There are more pyramids here than there are in Egypt. This was a major civilization, but its history is barely remembered. So what was Nubia actually like? How powerful was it? And what happened to it in the end? To begin my search, I'm leaving the Sudanese capital Khartoum and flying north into Nubia.
This is every schoolboy's dream. This ancient old helicopter is going to take us up to see some of the ancient Nubian sites. I've got this fantastic guide here. This is Mahmoud. It's going to help to tell me what some of the sites mean.
Mahmoud Bashir is one of Sudan's most respected archaeologists. He's taking me on a journey, not just through space, but time, going back nearly 10,000 years, to the time when humans first began to plant crops and to keep domestic animals. We're going northwards along the Nile. If it weren't for the Nile and its irrigation, this whole scene would be desert. And from the air, it's easy to see how narrow the cultivation strip really is. But Mahmoud tells me we're going to leave the green corridor of the Nile and head out into the desert proper. Out here is one of the toughest places on Earth. The temperature here is more than 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and yet there are still people working here. This is where I'm going to start my journey, right in the back of beyond. We've flown more than 250 miles north from Khartoum into the middle of the Nubian desert. 15,000 square miles of arid sandstone with scarcely a single oasis. From here, we're going to drive across the scorching sands. And Mahmoud tells me we're going to start with the very beginnings of Nubian culture, more than 7,000 years ago.
Oh, it's hot. It's baking. What are you doing today? I can't believe we've come out here. It feels like the middle of nowhere. It's one of the driest, most remote places I've ever been. But Mahmoud says that here there's something that makes all the suffering we've gone through really worthwhile. So let's have a look. But why did you bring me out here?
Actually, because this is it's very important place, and here actually where our story will begin. Something interesting.
Oh, it's a bell.
It's not a bell, but it's what we call the rock gong.
So how old is this, Mahmoud?
It's not less than 5,000
5,000
BC.
years? Wow. So I'm playing a 5,000 BC instrument.
Yes.
The actual sound is the natural result of the consistency of the rock, but it's been worn smooth by the actions of people playing it more than 7,000 years ago, long before the Romans, long before the Pharaohs. This is a sign of human civilization.
So would they sing along to this?
I don't know exactly, but I think they can imagine more dancing than singing.
More dancing.
In the last few years, archaeologists have found hundreds of rock gongs like this in the Nubian desert, possible evidence of a sizable population.
I imagine you'd be able to hear it from a long distance.
From a long distance, and I think we think actually it's the same as what we have now about the drum language in Africa.
Yes.
It's probably it was doing the same function at that time.
Archaeologists think that people here may have used the rock gongs to communicate across the valleys, and that this is the beginning of the Nubian culture. But why here? This is the middle of one of the harshest deserts in the world. Mahmoud has something to show me. It's been a secret until recently.
Now I will show you a very special thing.
Oh!
Have a look at it.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. It's cattle.
Yeah.
And how old is that?
Something like 5,000, 6,000 BC.
BC!
BC.
5,000, 6,000. It's just astounding. When were these discovered?
It's just last March. Can you imagine?
Last March?
We are in August.
So not many people have seen
months ago. Yes, you are the second after the mission who discovered the site.
Really?
Really, you are the second to be here.
Rock art is the oldest form of pictorial representation known. Research has shown that the pictures are unlikely to be just a depiction of everyday life. Instead, they concentrate on subjects that are of great significance to the people who made them. So I'm amazed to discover that out here, deep in the Nubian desert, they should be making images of cattle.
But this is desert, though.
But it wasn't the desert in 7 or 6,000 BC.
Mahmoud tells me it's a story of catastrophic climate change. Recent research has shown that some 7,000 years ago, most of the Sahara was in fact green. You can see the outlines of dry valleys or wadis. They were once big rivers which flowed into the Nile. And between them stretched grassland savannas of the kind that you have to go much further south to see today.
So this area here, once upon a time would have had grass in it, it would have been lush, it would have supported cattle and or probably complex communities as
Yes,
well.
and even wild animals.
What kind of animals might it?
Yeah, actually, based on the rock drawings we have around here, we have lions, we have elephants, we have giraffes.
So the wildlife and the ecology of sub-Saharan Africa once existed.
Yes.
That's amazing. And this is the proof of that.
Yeah.
So you can imagine sort of the cattle, well, with a stretch of the imagination, the cattle in this valley, the river just down there.
Yes, yes.
And people, someone at some point coming up here and with one of these stones just
And
making this
depicting all this kind of drawings.
Yes.
It's amazing, really.
Yes. Yes.
Maybe the same people who play the rock gong are the same who depict these drawings here.
It took thousands of years for the desert to dry out completely. So the cattle herding or pastoralist society which created the rock art was able to develop into a much more complex community. And I'm told that they produce something quite spectacular. And that's where I'm headed for now. We're pushing northwards along the Nile, some 700 miles from Khartoum and less than 200 from the Egyptian border. Our destination is the small town of Kerma, which sits by the Nile. This was once the capital of the kingdom which the Egyptians knew as Kush. This was the heart of the kingdom of Nubia. Over the last few decades, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of an impressive city here, dating from around 2000 BC. This extraordinary structure looms like a man-made mountain over the ruins.
Karma, it's kind of a development of the community who make the rock art. So we have here like more organization.
At the heart of this great city was a huge mud brick structure known as the Dafufa. It's the oldest known mud brick building in Africa and one of the largest. But it has no rooms. It's a solid block of masonry.
They've actually built a piece of geography because it's absolutely solid mud. And what is it, and what might it have been used for?
I believe that it's something associated with rituals. It's something like a temple or something like this.
We don't know who the god or gods were that these people worshipped, but according to Mahmud, it was the temple on the top of the Dafufa which was the main focus here. It was surrounded by palaces for royalty or priests.
Now we are on the top of the Dafufa.
Yes.
And you can see surrounding the Dafufa is the administration city of Karma.
So these are the raised foundations of...
the foundation of the buildings.
I see.
Has been found here, and this kind of a reconstruction of the foundation to show us the plans of this building.
I see.
Judging by the buildings that the archaeologists have uncovered in the last 10 years, Kerma was not so much a residential city as a place of pilgrimage where people would come from miles around for ceremonies. Then, of course, it would have looked very different.
And it's easy to forget, but all of this was really green.
Yes, it's more green, and it's surrounded by green, and so there is enough food, enough water.
And so it could have been a fairly wealthy area.
It's really developed a very strong kingdom at that time. So all these economical sources supported the state to be very strong state.
There's a small museum here with some of the finds from the excavations which give a flavour of the Nubian culture. And even when it's laid out like this, with the artefacts numbered off and catalogued, you can see quite how distinctive it is. Take the pottery. Archaeologists now know that people were making pottery here even before they began to plant crops, and long before ancient Egypt. The polished surfaces and black rims imitate the forms of polished drinking gourds I've seen and used elsewhere in Africa. It's extremely finely made, but it's done entirely by hand. They weren't using a potter's wheel for this. And the extraordinary thing is that this technique can still be found today, 4,000 years on. Everywhere you go around here, you see these characteristic water jars. They aren't mass-produced in a factory. Instead, they're made by women in a local village.
Just gathering some goat poo, I think it is, which apparently is used in the mixture with the clay. And this is a village across the Nile from where we've been staying, where they create these amazing clay pots, and we're being shown by one of the local women how they actually do that from the point of kneading the clay to the finished product.
I've done some pottery myself, and I know from hard experience that this technique is actually extremely difficult. It's as sophisticated as the mud brick architecture of the Dafufa. This technique may be ancient, but it's